So what we've been doing in the previous segments was tooling, shaping, getting our pieces into this to this point. So what we're seeing here now is the finished halves, or near finished halves, that are now pretty much in their shape, and you can see that they want to resist being distorted at this point. They're reasonably dry. They're pretty damn close to 100% dry. I would want to wait probably another day before I would actually do any wax treating or anything with these, primarily due to the fact that if I put them into the wax, hot wax, when these were still mildly damp, I would end up absolutely destroying my pieces, which would be very frustrating, just to say the least. So what we're going to be doing now is going from this point. This is the outside connecting plate or band that we've created, and what's going to happen is I'm going to be stitching this onto this side, basically into this position. I'm going to have some overlap on either end. The reason for the overlap on either end is that eventually, once I get done and I have this connecting piece, as you see the inside connecting plate in, I'm going to overlap the top and the bottom over top of it just to give it a more finished look. I have previous pieces here that you can see where I didn't do that, and I don't like the look, so I've decided from now on I'm going to do that with these. Once I have this outside plate on, I'm going to then take this narrower band, and we are going to be doing the same thing basically on the inside, is stitching this in. It's narrower, and it will act basically to avoid this kind of play. It'll stiffen our back, stiffen our spine, as it were. It will also give, as you can tell, a considerable amount of leather. Like, this is already 8-ounce leather, and so once we're done, that's going to give us pretty close to, well, almost a half-inch of spine right along this point of the elbow. So after we get this all stitched together, I'm going to let it make sure that it's dry. I may do a slight amount of burnishing and that on it just to get rid of this fuzz. And then we will be going on to the dyeing process. So right now, I'm just going to put these guys aside. I'm going to grab my thread, wherever he is here. As you can see, I have a mess of thread. I'm going to be using a blunted needle. Let's see, which one do I want to use here. As you can tell, I have an abundance of needles, a assortment of riches, as it were. There we are. That's the one I want. Now, I'm going to start out, and I'm going to take my water again, and I'm just going to dampen this piece. I'm not going to get it totally soaked. I'm just going to dampen it a bit, just to give it a little more flex. I'm going to want an overlap of about, I think it looks like about 5 holes in this case. Just going to check my length, make sure I've got that. Yep, I do. So, minimum of 5. So again, start out at my top, lining it up. I'm going to, let's see, get this guy out of the way here. I'm going to bury my thread. I try to avoid knots wherever possible. I'm using a single strand. So again, what I'm doing now is if you can see that, I'm just going to cross my thread over, bring it back and through. There's my my thread end, making sure that I'm through the string. And there we are, we're tight. And again, that's just one, and I'm not able to pull that all the way through. So it's locked. I'll put a couple more. I'll do that a couple more times just to be sure. Oops. Carefully not getting my work caught up. Too much anyway. And again, sorry, I'm losing control of my work here so you can't see what I'm doing. Again, I'm going to bury the thread one more time. Come on, you. Frustrating when the teacher can't find the appropriate spot and wastes video time. So, making sure to tighten up my work as I go, make sure you can see we're locked up. It's not going anywhere. And by doing that, we also try to minimize as much awful looking thread on the back. Also, you'll find that if you use too many knots, just knotting it off, you plug your holes, and when you're going back through, and in this case, because I'm just using a single needle method, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make it so that I can't get my thread. Oh, come on, it's a lot easier than that. See, this is the joy of shooting video like this too, is that you can see that sometimes, even those of us that have done a tremendous amount of stitching in that over the years, it can be very awkward and have problems, just like everybody else. Now, so you know, I punch these holes using just a hammer punch. So not everything I do, I use my drill presses. I just find that using the old drill press with the punch put in the chuck and having it spinning in beeswax, it's a lot easier on the punch because you're not hammering it, not banging it into anything, so you're destroying the sharpness of the punch. It's also, I find, just quicker. And when I'm doing a lot of leather work, especially if I'm making a lot of pieces, a lot of repetition, a hammer punch just takes way too long. Oh, I got a bit of a knot here. So I'm going to back, pop that out. Best thing to remember when you're doing stuff like this is be gentle on yourself. Be patient. Not everything works perfectly every time, first time. So I'm going to go all the way down with this. The approach of my dog. Hear her toes. I can hear her whine. Oh, we get. Because you need good eyesight to hit the eye of the needle. Anyway. Neatness counts. I'm trying to keep my tension about the same with each stitch. Something you have to note too, when you're working with wet leather and you're stitching, you can damage your leather. You also not pull it tight enough, because the one thing you have to remember is, of course, that you've put water into this, which has expanded it a little bit. There's always the risk that when it dries, it'll shrink. And if it shrinks down, it may actually be smaller or thinner, I guess I should say. Alright, now I'm coming to the end of this line. Now in this case I have enough thread that I'm just gonna double it back on itself. So, and there we have that. So we have that piece on. It's nice too being damp because you can see how the contrast, you can see our little tag here. I can, again, take my scissors if I want. In this case, these guys, I'm just going to knock that tag off. And you can see it's fairly clean. Alright. So now I'm going to double back. Sometimes it's good just to do this in front of video, television, or whatever. A lot of other work I do, I have it because of my day job. I usually end up spending a fair amount of time in front of the computer. So I'll have a piece of work beside me on the desk, so when I'm sitting there I'm either teleconferencing or if I'm sitting in on a meeting, what I can do is I'll have these something to the side that I can work on, as opposed to when I'm working down in the shop on either steel or, there's just not that option, right? Or if I'm working at the forge, again, I just don't have that option. So leather does tend to be nice and neat because you can do it in front of your television in the evenings. You can escape with it in front of your computer if you have to. So what I'm going to do when I get to the end here is I will again double back and bury my stitches underneath the thread that's already put in. I showed you that earlier. Well, sometimes you miscalculate a bit. If you do end up miscalculating and you don't have enough thread, pick a spot to stop so that you have enough, because you can always start another piece of thread and finish your line off rather than trying to make a piece that's too short work, because that can just lead to a whole lot of frustration. Now again, what's happening as I'm going along here, I'm running into the thread again that I've already buried once, so I'm just going to go back and I'm double burying it, right? So that not having the knots there means that I'm not going to end up inadvertently filling a hole with a knot, which, oops, have I missed one? Yeah, I did miss one. See that? So coming up on the end, I've got lots left here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back underneath. Bury my stitch a couple of times. There we go. It's nice and tight and snug. Uh-oh, what did I do there? There we are. Alright, grabbing my scissors, snipping that off. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go take this side, I'm going to stitch that one in, like so, and then after I've got that done, I'm going to rejoin you again and we'll do the attachment on the back plate. So, coming together nicely.